Welcome to No Clip, the podcast that's like a book club for people who don't think books reward them enough for being good at them. I'm Chad Ruthermond.
I'm Andy Kinnick.
And I'm Janelle Vickers.
And today, we're going to be talking about Heaven's Vault, which was developed by Inkle, published by Inkle, and was released in 2019 on Windows and PS4. And you've written here, with a Switch port in 2020?
Yeah, it says that on Wikipedia, but I think, like many things this year, it got delayed because of COVID.
Yeah, we are fast approaching 2021,
Yes.
which would invalidate this claim.
So, yeah, I couldn't find any updated information on the status of that.
Yeah.
Listen, the question mark covers everything.
Yes.
2020 question mark circa 2020?
We cannot be held reliable.
The internet said so.
Yeah. Heaven's Vault, though, is a, what do you want to call it? An adventure game. A linguistics-based adventure space game.
Yes.
No, please keep going. I need more adjectives, please.
And robot friend simulator.
A robot friendship simulator. Because as we know, robots are going to be very difficult to get along with in the future. And we played this game mostly because it just seemed so very different from, like, most video games generally.
Yeah, I saw it a long time ago on, like, a list of upcoming games at the time that you probably haven't heard of. I think it was in early access then. And it just jumped out at me, like, the visual style and the concepts just, are very eye-catching, I think. And so I had it in, like, the back of my brain for the podcast for a while. And also it seems very up Janelle's alley, so I feel like I recommended it to her.
And then I said, "You fool. I'm already aware of this. How dare you?"
You great fool.
I am a great fool.
So, yes, as an ex sort of almost linguist, the closest thing that you guys know as a linguist, I was
That's
like,
accurate, yeah.
y'all need to play this shit. Etc.
If we tried to find hire an expert to come on to the show, but we were limited to only people that we personally knew, you would have been the first person we talked to, even if you hadn't already been on the show before.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah.
At least I know where I stand. You at least would have had to talk to me to get someone to come on the podcast. So
Exactly, yeah. Like, oh, Janelle, there's this game that we think you would really like. Can you find us someone else to talk to about it?
Hey, there are some pretty hotshot linguists out there that I sort of almost kind of know, that I have mutual acquaintances with, that, I could have maybe not been effectual at all in getting them on the podcast. So I could have maybe almost flexed nuts for a minute.
We should have just had Janelle get two other people to replace us, and they could record a podcast.
Yeah, I was going to say, what you would have actually been almost successful in doing was giving us massive imposter syndrome as people who really know what they're talking about talk about language. Which I think brings me to the first thing that we should probably talk about with this game, which is this game involves a lot of dialogue and a lot of talking and a lot of reading, but a lot of that reading and talking and dialogue is not in a human language. It is in a representative, symbolic language that over the course of the game you are tasked with deciphering, like building out a dictionary to be able to actually translate the markings that you find. They're referred to as ancient in the game. And there are a million interesting implications as to how this was implemented throughout. And one of the things that I found kind of fascinating was that the language isn't actually solid. Like, it isn't, like, if you play through the game multiple times, different symbols can have different meanings, and they're on a seed. So you could actually, some phrases and terms can be different from playthrough to playthrough and won't always mean the same stuff. and that is interesting, kind of both because it makes like replaying the game a more different experience each time, but also because I felt like when I was playing through, they did such a good job of communicating to the player that I genuinely felt like I understood parts of the language by the end of it. And the idea that that could just be trashed and replaced with something new is very heartbreaking a little bit. I wanted to be finally learn a second language and that language be ancient.
An honorary degree in ancient.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can tell, I think, the more you play, just how like intricate the design of it is, or like how complex, because there are like multiple different like symbols that could mean different things. Like I didn't know that could happen. Like some of it was randomized. But hearing that, it kind of makes sense. Like there were certain words I was like, I'm sure this is harvest because of like X, Y, and Z, and it ended up not being that. And now I know that for someone else that word probably was.
Yeah, it could have been harvest.
So yeah, there has to be like so many layers to this.
Well, but it's because what I think is really smart is it's so weird because as I was doing my research before coming on to talk to you guys, I read, I think it was a Verve article where I don't know if it was one of the devs or someone involved said, oh, we made a game that linguists will probably like really hate, or like linguists will hate this. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, was this just like a clever some kind of a PR stunt to be like, oh, we made a game about linguistics that linguistics will hate? And I'm like, I thought this was fucking great, and I thought it was really smart, because the way that, if you're looking at it from, you're looking at a dead language, and what you know about the language is what little information you have historically, you're going to make judgments and interpretations about that culture and what they would have been talking about and what they would have recorded. So in your translations of these words, if you think that they're a warlike society, you might translate a word differently than someone who viewed them as peacekeepers or as, you know, kings or as politicians, you know, so there's that slight variation of you as Aaliyah being...
That's how I was pronouncing it.
Yeah, that's what I think it is.
It, of course, because I studied Arabic, I'm like, Aaliyah, and I'm like, you idiot, just let it go. But so basically, yeah, the idea that we know that language is shaped around a people's culture, and that culture also shapes the language. So in trying to rebuild knowledge of a culture and simultaneously rebuilding a language that is literally been exterminated, we find out, you know, you're kind of filling in the gaps of both. So if you do translate a word as death, and then you see a similar word coming up, you might be like, well, this means dying or dead. But depending on how you translated that first phoneme, that first set of glyphs, will affect then all of the other conjugations of the same word throughout the game. So I thought that was really clever, because you're playing a character that is, I think no matter how you play her, a pretty rash and judgmental individual. So she's making a lot of judgments about the culture that she's encountering by the words that she's translating, and then she's also affixing meaning to those glyphs based on what she sees in the environments around her. So I thought that was a really interesting way of showing how language both shapes and is shaped by perceptions.
Yeah, it reminds me of that one part from the movie Arrival where I don't remember the exact quote or what exactly is going on in the scene, but she talks about how, like, we don't know that this word means weapon. It could very well be tool. So, like, it's that same kind of concept of, like, your relationship to the culture or your view on what it was like will affect the way that you interpret the words. And it's really smart how the game, like, incorporates that. And I'm curious, like, as you just brought up, it's something I hadn't thought about too much, is, like, the way you translate the words seems like it might even like impact your dialogue options, like what you would say about the things that you find.
Yeah, it definitely affects the dialogue as it plays out. Whether or not it affects your choices or not, I'm not 100% sure. There seemed to be a ton of work that went into making the individual branches in each like little story tree very diverse. There are a lot of different things that you can have happen, and a lot of different kind of subtle changes that can occur in each conversation and each thing like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if your translations also played a role in that. But I know that like there are assumptions that your character will make and then take into other conversations with other people based on what your translations are, even if they aren't like complete in the sense that the game has like told you that the word is correct. So I know on the planet that has like the big dish with the gravity well in it, the upstream, you can translate what's on that, like the hatch, to something about like the river, and it'll trigger this whole conversation about rivers and where they come from, and then you can take that information and go back to Eberus?
Oh,
Elbereth?
Elbereth, yeah. And
what did you say?
I think it was a D&D plane.
Okay.
Everon, yeah.
Okay. I thought you said Everest for a second.
Yeah, you take it back to Mount Everest, and you meet your mountaineering tech friend there, and you can ask her about where she thinks the rivers come from. Obviously, it doesn't yield a whole lot, but it's an entire conversation that you can have that is based on a translation that you made that by the game's own admission, you don't know if it's accurate or not. And I really liked that, and I liked how much the language element of this game played into the other elements.
Well, and that was one thing that I felt like I was getting rewarded by the game, but I also wanted to participate in as many conversations as I could, even if those conversations were just bouncing ideas off of your robot, whether in the form of Six or in the form of NK. But just being like, where do you think the rivers come from? And the robot being like, that's a dumb fucking question. And me being like, yeah, but what if it's not a dumb question? And so it's lore building as far as the world that the game is creating, which is this huge, I think, really expansive, lore-rich environment. But it also does inform the way that you move through the game. So, just as an example there, at the very, very beginning, you run into one of your university friends who's, like, the librarian. And there's an optional conversation you can have, and he talks about the fact that robots were buried in the walls at IOX, and then you're given a chance almost immediately afterwards to do one of your first translations. And I was like, I don't know any of this. How am I going to possibly translate this phrase? And then I was like, well, maybe because I had that conversation, the game is trying to, like, signal to me or, like, give me an idea. And so I was able to translate that phrase correctly about the robots and blah, blah, blah. Because the game rewarded me for either exploring further or, like, asking questions or, you know, taking the time to talk to this guy where I could have just as easily been like, fudge off, you fuck. I gotta get off this moon. But, you know, so that was something that, like, from the very beginning, I was primed by the game to say, okay, I will learn more about the world by translating, and I will be able to translate more easily, and probably with fewer mistakes, by talking to people and exploring the world. Okay, got it. Like, from the beginning, you were set up to have this understanding of the more you learn about the world, like, the easier those kind of game mechanics will be.
Yeah. And I think that this game does, like, a uniquely good job of creating that sense of... I say uniquely, and then JJ is going to yell at me, because Return of the Overdin is a game that happened, but...
I was not on that cast, so
That's true, but you did play the game though.
I did.
Or like, you were around while the game was being.
Oh
played.
no, let me tell you something. Daniel would still be stuck on the poop deck, examining some shades without me. I was the true brains of that operation.
Okay, so yeah, you were the brains of the operation.
Oh, I was the
Repair
brains of the Overden. But anyway, so it's
So similarly to Overdin, this game does a really good job of creating like that actual sense of like I'm using my own gray matter to process this information and create like my conclusions, because it gives you just enough hints and also lets you move on without being 100% certain about stuff, that when you do get to a point where you feel like, oh, duh, the apostrophe symbol means of, so if there's an apostrophe before a thing, it's probably possessive, and then you go back and you feel like you invented the English language,
right.
as you fill out all of the other things that you had tried before.
And the X is like a negative, so it's not.
Right, yeah.
And I'm like, son of a bitch.
Yeah, and you do get a really strong sense of that, I think. Like, I also, like Janelle, talk to everybody. Like, every time I come back from a site, I would go everywhere and talk to everybody, because it always felt like there was a bunch of stuff I might miss. Like, I had it really, like, almost kind of similarly to, like, West of Loathing. Like, it felt like the possibility space was huge, and, like, stuff could be happening all over that I'm just missing in this game to me. Because I know I went back to Elbereth and talked to, I think her name's like Ori or like Ori or something like that. Who works with the robots and the mechanical stuff. And like I talked to her about the one planet that had or the moon that had all of the statues of the gods. And you had to have like 6 head to go over like a bookshelf ramp to get out there.
Right.
That planet. And I brought her back there with me and like had this whole big thing. And I know that you didn't do that. And I was like, it seemed like a really big, important like thing. And then you can just totally miss it. And I know early on I missed the funeral.
I didn't go back for the
Renba's funeral. Yeah, I just completely forgot about that. I was like, oh, whoops. I wonder what happened with that. So like I think there's like significant stuff you can miss. And I always had that feeling in like the back of my head, like it really felt like a living universe within this game to me.
Yeah, I did go to that funeral, but I think what I'm learning is that in the universe of this game, I am that guy, like the dead guy, because rather than talk to a lot of people and make lasting friendships, I went off on my own like an insane person floating for hours in space reading a book in a language I don't know. So I was like the crazed madman. I did go back and like I did some more like humanitarian things. I freed that worker guy who injured himself. Mm-hmm. And I talked to people when I felt like it would benefit me, but I could not be fucked to go around and to every planet between every event, and did not do it.
To be clear, someone at Inkle, I was found, it was buried in some blog post somewhere, has said that at least one person has completed the game without doing any relevant story content. Like, that they just sat on the map and sailed the rivers and stopped at ruins and found the major moons that you have to go to, and like, that's it. It was just them and 6 floating out there, and then they found the Withering Palace, and they solved the river puzzle and shot themselves out there to Heaven's Vault, and they did it. It was all done, so it's feasible. And they said...
I'm glad that is possible.
Oh, I think they also said in that same post that at some point they were looking into doing just like basically a cruising mode where you didn't have to have a set destination when sailing, that you could just noodle around on the rivers and see where you ended up. So that could be the Chad Rutherman approach of just fishing shit out of the rivers, translating, going back over your dictionary, continuing to sail, shooting the shit with six, you know.
I'm really surprised the game works that way, because I always assumed the parts that you didn't have filled in on the chart or the map would just be like locked off, like you couldn't go to them if you tried to sail around.
I never encountered a roadblock when I was playing.
Yeah, I never tested it. I just assumed it worked that way.
There were times when it was like, you can go to these 3 different places, and then I would have a thing that was like, we found a cup that points to maybe somewhere in this 3-mile vicinity there might be something of interest. And it was like, the other options were like, go talk to the professor lady, or go here and talk to that like scumbag dude who sells shit.
Toppy?
And I was like,
yeah.
Toppy. You guys love proper names, don't you?
Oh yeah.
Go talk to Professor Lady and Scumbag Dave and
well, it's also been like 2.5 weeks since I played this game.
Robot Friend Lady and that professor who just hangs out in space and
and the space professor, the dead man. But yeah, and so I just was like, I'll go in the aimless wandering direction rather than fly back to a planet.
Yeah, I think it was like early on. You have you have to find you find these 2 artifacts that you think come from the same place, and then it like overlaps this space on the map, and it's like, oh, the planet or the moon must be in here. And then then you go and you sail to it. So I just kind of assumed you needed enough information to be able to sail to places, and never like tried to just free roam. But I think that's awesome that you can.
Yeah. Well, yeah, what she was talking about with what the developers wanted to implement was, now in order to sail, you have to like say I'm going here, but that doesn't mean that you can't just turn right
and go somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's what I did, at least for one of the sites. It was the one that was kind of like south of Ranaki, which was the merchant moon.
Right.
With the scumbag robot guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, the library. Which infuriated me because I ran out of oxygen right before I got to the book.
Ooh.
Yes. No. But, so I knew that there was probably something there in that little area on the map. So I just set a destination for Elbereth or whatever and just continually missed my turns as I made my way up there. And then as I was on my way, I encountered ruins that got me that sort of general area to go to. So I think that's a feasible
waypoint.
Feasible option is just to kind of head to that area, and there was no other sites left for me to find. And so the game was like, "Oh, you're probably looking for this. Have a cup." And I'm like, "Thank you. Yes, you're correct."
Love that cup. Yeah, I did I'm fighting myself in my brain here because like I wanted to launch it and talk about the language and the translation because obviously it's a big focus of the game, and also because I super did not want to start the podcast by being like, man, is sailing the worst thing I've ever done in my whole life?
You didn't like it?
We're definitely verging now into that conversation.
Well, listen, I'm not done talking about the language. You brought an ex-linguist on the podcast. We're going to circle back to it. So we might as well circle endlessly in the streams of the discussion of the streams.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think the main reason that I did not do what everyone is insinuating, including myself, that I would do, which is just sort of float around and look for cool shit, which conceptually is my favorite thing about this, is that you are essentially given a really open-ended quest at the beginning of translate this language, and then they give you really specific quests as well, like go find what happened to this dude, go find the library, go find Heaven's Vault. But the idea of just tooling around in space until you find like some interesting shit and having that like help your overall goal of like being able to translate all of the other stuff that you found was really interesting to me and something that I absolutely loved. The act of being on the mockingbird, the nightingale.
There you go.
I know. I got it on try to.
That was its sister ship.
Yes,
Is the Mockingbird.
The mockingbird and the nightingale. Was a horrible experience pretty much the entire time.
I knew that you would hate it.
Yeah.
It does control kind of clunkily, but I feel really similarly about it as I do to like the gummy ship from Kingdom Hearts, where a lot of people like to shit on it and talk about how it's not like super good or fleshed out and kind of cumbersome.
Mm-hmm.
But like I love that it's there. Like I like being able to like sail a ship between planets and like what that adds to the experience. Like it actually feels like you're traveling through space and you don't just like warp to planets.
But why?
But the way that it controls is very hard to do well, and then if you like go towards a rock, it like auto moves you to the side and it feels weird. So I get your complaints, but those kinds of things historically don't bother me as much as they do you.
Yeah, I felt like it should have either had a lot more input or a lot less input. I loved that if you're going somewhere that you've already been, you can just have 6 do it, and I did it 100% of the time that it was offered to me, and like that because it's so mushy to do anything. And the dialogue occurs, and it talks for its duration, and then it will tell you about a turn you should take. And I'm like, I took the wrong turn 6 minutes ago while you were still talking about like you're waxing philosophical about the fates and shit, and what you need to say is, oh, make a right here if you want to keep searching, and make a left for a huge detour that takes 15 minutes. And I was just like, left hand rule, and went the left way.
I think that doesn't work
huge...
as well in space.
No, it super doesn't.
But I mean, there were the little kind of foggy arrows that were in the right place. So like even if 6 didn't tell you, you could be like, oh, okay, I guess I gotta go this way, and then you would go and do the thing.
The arrows are only there if you're navigating to a specific location.
Oh, so you're talking about
noodling.
noodling. The noodling.
Yeah, the noodling. Because what he'll say is, don't turn this
Right.
direction, or like this will put us back on the rivers.
Right.
And you want to stay sort of in like the unknown shores. So I felt like I wasted a ton of time just getting back on track.
Yeah, there was one in particular, like one noodling spot like that, where I missed a turn like several times because 6 was just talking about something else.
Yeah, it's really infuriating.
Yeah, that was the only time that it was really an issue for me.
Maybe I'm a psychopath, but I thought it was really relaxing. Daniel got me a wireless keyboard for my birthday, and I was just like, mouse one hand, keyboard the other hand, just going, and I would tab a lot because tab would bring up the map. So even if you were in a noodly spot, I would be like, okay, so where do okay, I'll need to turn. Got it.
Yeah, I
feel like
until
I feel like 6 warned me adequately. I don't know. Maybe you just really pissed your 6 off, and he had a lot to say. I don't know.
Yeah. That's
a whole other conversation.
I didn't realize you could like actually pull up and navigate with the map until like over halfway through the game. I was like, oh, this is like way useful in these situations where I can actually just look at where I'm going.
I did use it. I didn't love using it. As far as maps go, this is very middle of the road for me. I feel like the map itself is fine. I think that the act of bringing up the map screen almost crashed the game half the time because it would like the timeline like flies by at a
Well, that's only if you scroll down to where the timeline is.
And then like the characters standing up there talking and the dialogue covers the bottom half of the map. I'm just like, it's so much. I just want a map. Like I feel like a mini map, something that we talk about normally not liking because it's immersion breaking and doesn't let you focus on what is the best part of the sailing, which is the cool atmosphere. The fact that they did all of these like skyboxes and the background design where it really does, even though you're on sort of a flat plane, it does feel like you're really floating through space. with like the cloud cover and stuff blocking off paths. But I think the mini-map would have been overall a positive, because then I wouldn't have to open the map, have it come up, have the dialogue play, have me move the map all around.
I feel like you were doing something wrong with the map. Because I'm pretty sure you could just open it, look at it, and put it away, and the timeline wouldn't come up, nor would dialogue happen.
Yeah, there was maybe a different...
Was there a dedicated map button that
like
wasn't the same one that opened, like,
Yeah.
the screen I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Because for me, it was, like, press in on the weird touchpad on the PS4 controller.
Yeah, there was just, like, while sailing, there was a button that would just, like, pull up the chart, and you could just look at it.
Yeah, that's the button I hit.
Yeah. I don't know what else you were doing.
I mean, because I do remember at different times, usually, like, being on a planet, pressing something, and then the whole timeline and everything would come up. But I think it was, like, a dedicated, hey, you want to look at the timeline? Or you want to look at where this event took place in the timeline? And it would come up.
Right, yeah.
I don't know. I liked the whole sailing experience. As someone, like, the first time that I had to sail, I was like, ah, Jesus. Like, I don't want to have to worry about fucking crashing in a rock or missing a turn or whatever. So the fact that it was like, hey, boop boop, why don't you go around this rock? Or like, hey, dumbass, you missed your turn. Hit backspace to reset. I was like, oh... Thank you. Very forgiving. For me, it was like a relaxing minigame. I do appreciate that they had
a reset button.
Yeah, and I almost never fast traveled because I wanted to have conversations with my robot. Out of the three of us, I put the most hours into the game, I think. I don't know how long you played, Chad, but just comparing my Steam history with Andrew's, we were almost neck and neck, and then I pulled away a little bit at the end. But
I also looked at your stuff, and you had like a couple more achievements than me. So you were more thorough too.
I did get the master or whatever the highest linguist level was, and I was like, see,
did you not?
No, I don't think so.
All right, we can now loop back to language.
Language. Yeah, so I would get so fucking hype when the screen would cut to Aaliyah holding something, and she would have her hand in that particular position of, finger lightly extended, like looking at something with a furrowed brow, because I'm like, yes! It's time to fucking translate! Let's go! Yep. And because I played the game kind of piecemeally, so I started it, and then you guys said you were going to be doing it for the podcast, so I kind of put it on hold a little bit, and then played it a little bit for like a week or so, and then I think Thanksgiving happened or something, and then I came back and finished it off. And so my concern after the first break was, like, how much of this am I going to lose as far as, like, what my actual real-life gray matter dictionary of words had. And so I thought it was really helpful that anytime you were looking at a new word or unfamiliar word or phrase, well, they had kind of like two, basically, translating minigames. One where words you had already translated would populate the bottom of the screen, and they would sometimes be the right words, sometimes be similar words, sometimes just include articles or prepositions like of, and, at, whatever. Yeah. And then there would be a whole string of seemingly indecipherable text, and you would have to kind of like drag and drop the right words and phrases into the right place. And then there were the ones where you had to base your guesses on what entirely new words were from similar words you had in your dictionary. So there might be a glyph, and then related words, because they had the same symbols, could be like sun, and life, and, I don't know, nebula, question mark? Because that was a word you thought you knew and you guessed on, but it isn't 100% sure. And so then you have to base your guess on this new word from those related words that you may or may not have right. And so I thought it was clever that not only were they testing your ability to find new configurations of glyphs that you already knew, as if letters in a word, but also what the relationship between these words in this culture would be like. So, is death related to release, or is death related to loss, or is death related to pain? So the way that you kind of create this word family based on the way that glyphs are used in similar words, kind of what we were talking about, how you're building your understanding of what this culture was going through, and their highs and lows, and their downfall, and their, you know, like what cultural significance these objects had, and like what they were used for. I thought it was interesting how they had kind of both of those things. So is it fill in the blank, and then is it like creating these sort of word families?
Right. I want to, like, because I've also loved the translation. It was my favorite part of the game by a pretty big margin. And the creating of word families thing, I want to hone in on, because I feel like they do a really good job of getting across the, like, written aspects of the language. In terms of, like, using symbols and stuff in a way that, like, logically makes sense to somebody who has not studied language. Just, like, general audience understanding of what symbols could mean in, like, certain things. I felt like the related words hint bubble at the top was a little bit cheating a lot of the time. Like, it would just say, like, this word is similar, and you look at it and you're like, I would have never thought that those two words are similar.
Really?
But you can use that as a hint to still be like, oh, this thing is, if it's related to life, but it has an X in front of it, it's probably death.
Yeah, I feel like it's a necessary guiding hand.
You're probably right.
Yeah, and like, and I found there were times where it, like, I felt like it threw me off as well. So I felt like there was a kind of balance there that I enjoyed. And you could always contextualize it in your head as maybe, like, 6 is giving you the suggestions or something. Like, I kind of thought of it that way.
I hated when... So when you get a word correct, it'll be like when you've
I'm
when
sure
you put
of this
it in.
translation now.
Yeah. And she's, oh, I'm sure of this translation. I got this for sure. And I was like, fuck yeah. Love that. And then sometimes 6 would be like, you can be sure of that translation. And I'm like, shut the fuck up, 6. You don't have a human brain. You're not the translator.
Well, actually, he does have a human brain.
Okay, you got kind of a human brain, but, like, lay off. This is my shtick. I hated it 6 taking my thunder when I was solving translations, but that's a pretty minor point.
Well, again, another minor but sort of related point. Your favorite dirtbag artifact dealer and stealer and wheeler, Toppy, whenever you'd be translating in his shop, you'd be like, oh, I think this says this, but, you know, I can't be sure. I can check it out later. He would interject with things like, that could be anything. Like, those are just squiggles. You could tell anyone what that meant, and I'd believe it. Like, that means nothing. Okay, I guess. Yeah. Like, yeah, I love, like...
I always felt like he felt super sketchy, like, so much to the point where it felt like it was setting up for some, like, him, like, screwing you over or betraying you in some way.
I got trapped into a weird dialogue tree with him where I felt like I had no way to not tell him about the kid that I found.
Oh, yeah.
And... yeah, and then he was like, well, where is he? And I had to take the option that was like, I'll go to my grave before I tell you this information. And it just became this very hostile relationship very quickly, where I just wouldn't let this dude know about this kid because I just didn't like what his intentions were.
Well, it's probably for the best, because this is another good example of the branching storylines. So basically you go to this abandoned market moon. You find this little boy who thinks he's a pirate, and you're like, hey, where did you come from, my boy?
Doesn't he think he's dead?
He thinks he's dead because he said a word that activated the hopper on Elbereth, and it transported him there, and is feeding him, I guess, by transporting fresh fruit to him. And yet won't send this little boy back from isolation. Anyway. So
I
the
mean,
choice...
that would have been an ideal situation for me. If I was on Elbereth,
Oh,
of all
yeah.
fucking places, I would rather be living alone on the fruit buffet planet, like 10 times out of 10.
Well, so then basically you take him on the ship. Well, you can either just say, like, nah, he belongs to this moon now, bye. Or you can, like, hunt him down and take him back on your ship and be like, where do you want to go, boy? And he's like, I don't know, I've been on that moon since I was a baby. What's out there? And so you could be like, well, you're from Elbereth, so I guess it's time to take you back to the hell planet. Or, like, do you want to go to this super cool place where you can live with pigs and you think that they talk to you in your dreams? But that's obviously the option I went with, is
Same.
he gets raised by pig farmers and he thinks the pigs are talking to him because he's dealing with some severe PTSD. But
Yeah, I took
the
him
other...
to Elbereth.
Well, yeah, you could take
And
him
he
to
lives with the
Elbereth.
barkeeper.
Andy is the Law and Order candidate of the No Clip podcast.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. You could take him back to Elbereth and give him to the kindly, sort of creepy dude who would have married you and also tries to get you drunk a lot. But like overall,
Definitely creepy. Definitely creepy.
kind of a net positive for the boy, I guess. Overall, or you can take him to Toppy, who like apparently interrogates him.
Ooh.
Yeah,
like
so
that.
I mean, I definitely prefer the outcome where he's a little bit crazy and lives in the pigsty. At least the moon is verdant.
I don't even know how crazy he is, because like he does write ancient in the mud with a stick if
Yeah.
you go back and talk to him.
Oh, yeah.
So like there's no reason that he would know those things. I don't know if the pigs legitimately told him that.
I think that there's like an ancient hopper or some kind of ancient magic that's
Right.
going on there, and he just thinks it's the pigs. But also, I think he has some pretty severe PTSD from getting abandoned on a fucking moon as a baby. Because he got sucked through a gate after saying a quote-unquote bad word. Like, just imagine, you're trying to get in your apartment, you drop your keys, you say, ah, fuck. And then all of a sudden you get zip-zap-zopped to an abandoned moon. And every
Right.
once in a while, the moon spits some fruit at you, which keeps you alive. And also, you're like 5.
Yeah. I was going to say that I thought that he got the fruit from trees on the moon, but then he also had bread, so that
Yeah.
had to have been coming through the hopper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He said like if you investigate that moon, there's like a room. That moon was pretty disappointing to me as the aspiring linguist, because there was not a lot of text to translate, but there were a ton of these like little conversations, and he talks about how like the food just like showed up and they put it in this thing.
I could have swore that though that I examined some apples and it was like from the tree over there.
That also does
Yeah,
happen.
but
so.
anyway, this isn't important.
Right.
Well, but-
it does make for a good movie though, where you get sucked. Your apartment sucks you onto a moon. And then
yes.
it's like a
Like the Castaway.
yeah, it's like a Castaway movie. And then the alternative is you give the kid to the bartender, and then they make the Elberithian version of Big Daddy with Adam Sandler.
That's it.
Yeah.
he does use children to like steal things for him. The barkeeper does, but the kid seems like he's into it. So
he was acting like a pirate.
it does seem like his kind of lifestyle. So it's, I guess, as long. I just had to threaten the barkeeper to like not let anything happen to him, and then I felt my conscience clean.
Yeah.
Well,
So I wanted to ask. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh no, I'm sure whatever you were about to say is more important than... Let's talk about those feet.
I was going to pivot to a different subject.
To
here.
feet? To those feet?
It was not to feet. no.
Well, see, so it's probably better than what I was gonna say, which was, hey, how about them feet?
I might be able to work the feet in. We'll see what
Thank
happens.
God.
All right.
But no, I want to talk about like your character's dialogue and the amount of choice that you actually have, both in action and in what you say. Because and this could be a me thing, and I fully anticipate it being that.
Yeah, me too.
But I felt like the story was constantly pulling me in a direction with the character dialogue, and I always wanted to go in another direction that wasn't as like really harsh toward everyone. Like, I felt like, even especially in the beginning, like, and I understand they're trying to characterize your character, but a lot of the things that you say are really
standoffish.
Yeah. In like an upsetting kind of a way. So even at the end, when we're talking about this kid and we're going to take him to the farming planet, that was like an option I had, but like it's never, the reason I took him there is because throughout the whole game, the impression that I was getting was that Elbereth is a nightmare planet for everyone's life to be ruined on. And throughout, though, your character is still proud of their heritage. Like, I love that I am from this place with slavery on it. Like, it's like I'm trying to distance myself from it, but the character will not, even when I make strides specifically to avoid it.
Well,
yeah, I kind of agree. Early on, there's a lot of like, she's characterized as being very like antisocial almost, or like, yeah, like I said, standoffish and like not really liking people. And like, especially with robots, like with 6, she's kind of just like, oh, yep, just the 6th robot I got. Let's see how long he lasts. So I always kind of tried to steer her towards being nice. I don't know if that's just video game rebelliousness, like I'm going to do the opposite of what you're trying to do here. And I think it actually kind of worked towards the end. Like, I ended up getting a lot more, like, chill and cool, friendly dialogue options with 6. And, like, so I don't know how much the way your decisions impact that stuff, but I had some similar opinions, but I guess it affected different parts of like the dialogue and stuff for me specifically.
Well, I think it is at least intended to distance yourself from the protagonist. It is a role-playing game, but it's definitely not like an open-ended, like she very much has a character and a past and a backstory, and I think it works with the overall like world building that has happened. So there is freedom in your interpretation of the world around you and of the past, but there is so much lore and history baked into it. And I am, as everyone knows, the chronically nice person in RPGs. Like, I can't even be mean for the hell of it. It really is upsetting to me.
Awful good.
Yeah, but
Renegade Janelle is not a thing that happened.
No, but
Paragon Janelle.
Oh yeah, it's disgusting. But I think you can play her as kind of like someone who went on this adventure and learned some lessons and grew along the way and made a robot friend. But there definitely were at the end still options of being like, fuck you, 6. Also, I'm gonna sell you to this dude. See ya.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, they never went away entirely.
I sold 6.
Did you?
Did you really? What the fuck, Chad?
I didn't think it would
6.
let me do it. It was
Okay.
such an interesting choice.
Okay, that's fair.
And also, I was right. It didn't let me do it.
Okay.
He apparently, and I didn't know this, so this was blind luck. If I'm inhabiting the fiction, this was a blind luck thing because I didn't know this. You cannot pass ownership of 6 because you aren't his like primary user, whatever. Yeah. So I did sell him, assuming that something was going to come up and it would be like a funny scene. But then you just walk away and he isn't there. And you're like, uh-oh. So I went back and the dude was like, nice try. And then the rest of the conversation just happens. It's weird. I don't know.
I hate you for that. I love 6. Oh, he's my precious robot son. I love him so much. His little faces. I would call
Yeah.
Daniel out to the living room and be like, Daniel, look at his grumpy face. And he'd be on the screen just like, Like,
yeah, that
like when,
perfect upside down you.
yeah. And it was so good because I'd be walking around like Elbereth and he's like, I don't want to be here. And I'm like, Six, we have to be here. And I'd look at him in the background and he's just like motoring along with that deep frown. Oh, it's so good. But, I mean, I did allow him to be transformed into the Empress, I guess his true form. We learn that Six is not just our little robot friend, but is instead the stone cold first Empress of Iox, and apparently she was lurking in there the whole time. And I'm like, oh, Six, I thought you were my friend.
Yeah, I let her him transform into her as well, but then I immediately regretted it. Like I thought there'd be a way to like switch him back,
I think
and then we went to you go back to
Iox.
to Iox, and then the
Professor.
whatever, yeah, the professor,
Professor Mayari.
or whatever. Yeah, there you go. You just ask her to like order him to go back to being Six, and then he does.
But
Interesting.
But I wanted to keep her because even though I missed my robot friend, and now I have a woman in a robot form who calls me like street rat and wastrel and
I love the
peon.
hologram hair
Mm-hmm.
that's in there. Like I think that's a great touch.
Got all this information I don't have.
But
In my playthrough, Six was Six, the robot who didn't appreciate the fact that he was alone and also named in a very expendable way. And then in the end, the very last robot in the nebula. So
Oh no, you mistreated Six.
I didn't intentionally mistreat Six. He just interpreted everything I said as me dunking on him.
Oh, what was I saying? Oh, right. So I didn't change Six back because I was like, hey, she was there for all of the things that I want to know about. And I'd be like, hey, Empress, can you translate these things? And she's like, fuck no, I had scribes for that. And I'm like, I miss my friend. I want Six back now.
Yeah, it did seem like an interesting decision to like just leave him as the Empress, but I wasn't having it.
I almost kind of like the world in which they don't even give you the option, so that the people who really go above and beyond get shed on the hardest by the game. Who are just like, nope, I know that you made inroads and became good buddies with this robot, but he's gone forever now. Like, it's a real meaningful character death in a way.
Yeah.
Well, it is interesting if you make it to the end of the game with the Empress. I don't know what Six's dialogue was like, but there is a bit at the end of the game where you basically think you're past the point of no return. Like, you'll never see your friends again. Professor Mayari, who thinks that she's your mom. Womp womp. And basically, there's a bit of dialogue you can have where your buddy Huang, Wang?
Yeah.
Wong.
I called him Huang.
I said Huang.
I think it's Wong. But either way, your buddy the librarian.
Potato.
Yeah. Potatang, potatwang.
Potatong.
Yes.
Chad's good buddy Potatwong, who would help him translate texts and then leave the library for 30 minutes. Go to the corner of the map.
He was gone for so long.
You had to go take your cup to the curators. The curators would be very interested in this.
I'm sure they would be more interested in all the other stuff that I have to give to them.
But there's a bit where you think that you are never going to be back there again, and you're like, oh, Wong always promised me he'd tell me about Mazwai, this lady in his book, and oh, I wonder when he'll realize that I'm dead. And the Empress is like, that man would have been your slave if you asked him to. It's the best that you're not coming back. And I'm like, Empress.
Stone cold.
And then there's another bit where she's like, do you wish that you had stayed on Elbereth and married the bartender? I can't think of his name. The bartender. And she's like,
The
what?
bartender?
She's like, he didn't actually mean that he wanted to marry me. And she's like, oh no, he meant it. Men don't joke about marriage. I'm like, Empress, we could have been chilling like this, having hot goss about all the male characters in this game. And now all of a sudden you decide to, like, be friends, where before you were like, hey, dummy, you better turn left up here. Like,
okay, in the final scene of the game, spoilers.
I mean, isn't this? I mean, come on.
Yeah, maybe a little late for that, but in the last scene of the game, if you have the Empress, does she still turn into an eagle?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Just wanted to make sure because I felt like that would have been the moment that it would have made the biggest difference.
No,
for
she's still
somebody who didn't care about what Six was saying most of the time.
I thought you would love Six because he's a robot. Robots are cool.
I mean, that is
Baseline.
true. And I am a 90s kid. # only 90s kids. And we do love robots inherently. So, I don't know. We might get into it in a bit.
Yeah, I'm on #Team 6.
SEAL Team
But do
6.
I'm on SEAL Team
SEAL
6.
Team 6.
It's just led by him. It's like a bunch of Marines and like a little robot.
Oh, please.
Slowly.
Andy, Christmas is
SEAL
coming
Team,
up.
you must turn left.
Christmas is coming
Yes.
up. Please get me a beautiful artist's rendering of Six leading SEAL Team 6, like, on that horrible mining planet. With that dopey grin on his face. My beautiful son.
The smile or the frown? Which one would be more appropriate?
Oh, it's gotta be the frown, because he's serious. He's in battle. He's concentrating.
So, do we want to talk more about the game
And the plot.
and the plot
After the break? Yes.
You see, I just said it, and then you did an upward inflection like it was a question. So,
Yeah, when I answered the question.
Yeah.
It was planned and it was executed.
just like SEAL Team 6.
Just like SEAL Team 6.
Tact and precision.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Da-da-da-da-da.
Welcome back. Man, we did do a lot of talking already.
I just have so many
What do we-
thoughts. No one ever asks
that's
my
true.
opinion on things, Chad. This is my only outlet.
Your entire quarantine has just been you sitting just stark still on a couch being like, man, I wish somebody would ask me about anything. right
Literally anything. I don't even know linguistics. I just taught myself over quarantine.
now." Yeah, by playing Heaven's Vault, educational video game. Okay, so I had two big things, and I'm sure that you have notes because we always go into stuff and then you go, well, I wrote down everything else.
We actually covered a lot of what I have written down already.
That's pretty new
Yeah.
for us.
One of my notes, I was just telling Janelle, is literally just Six's facial expressions.
which we did cover somehow.
We sure did.
Normally we have like at least a part of the podcast where we talk about how the game is mechanically played, but honestly, I cannot think of a single thing that is like we talked about. I don't like the sailing. You were pretty medium on the sailing. Janelle liked the sailing. And other than that, most of what you do is sort of like walk around and interact with objects. Like it's pretty bog standard adventure game stuff. So I don't necessarily know that there's all that much to go into.
Yeah, we already kind of mentioned how the actual translation parts worked towards the beginning. So
I wish that there was a move more quickly option.
Oh yeah,
I know,
you do walk
especially-
pretty slow.
yeah.
I know you got a bad lung or two. Canonically, you got some
Yeah.
shitty lungs. But I'm like, hey,
You
maybe,
have shitty lung disease.
yeah, maybe we could pick it up a little bit, just a little bit. Maybe, like, I need to get to the other side of this courtyard. Because somehow, Six asks you a million times if you want to go back to the ship, and then the one time that you do want to go back to the ship, he doesn't ask you, so you have to walk all the way to the other side of the courtyard at the university, and I'm like, Aaliyah, girl, you're an archaeologist, you're out there. You gotta move a little faster.
The farming planet was the worst for me because it's all these
It's like tiered.
It's tiered, and like there are only ramps that go up, and then you go all the way around, and then up the other ramp. The wonking was dastardly slow.
Yeah, I think it's kind of tied with the animation. So like the way the game looks pretty unique. I kind of briefly alluded to it at the beginning, but all the characters are 2D sprites, and the backgrounds are like 3D modeled, so you're like a 2D character walking through a 3D world. Looks pretty cool. And when your character moves, it's like how would you describe it? It leaves like
it's a blur
of you as you walk, and I interpret it as of like echoes of the past, archaeology sort of thing. But yeah, it looks cool, but like so like the kind of like the frame rate of your character, I think it affects the speed at which you move, like the way it's rendered. So
I want to say that you are that it has been explicitly said that you were correct on that. The ghosting of your character
that's
as
a
you
good
walk
way to put
around, is supposed to reflect that this there's a element of the plot where the people on Iox believe in this like ancient religion called, I want to say it's called the Loop.
The Poop Loop.
Yeah.
I nailed it. And with the Loop, it says that everything that has happened before, and everything that will happen has happened before, and we just repeat the same cycle. So having like your character almost appear in multiple places at once is sort of like a metaphorical visual interpretation of that. So I think that you are just correct in that reading of it. The one thing I want to push back on is that it is good. Because I do agree that it is unique in the way that it looks, and I like that element of it, the fact that it is sort of tied into the way that that the game, the world is set up, right? But I visually think it is just a vomit-inducing nightmare. Like, I hate how everyone looks. I don't like the fact that whenever any change is made, it's just like a texture that they applied over top of the existing portrait. Like, to me, it looks bad, and it's like a purely aesthetic thing. Like, it's my own interpretation, but like, I love some of the backgrounds and some of the objects and stuff. Like, I think they did a really good job. The gods are all very evocative of what they're supposed to look like. And then you have little paper cutout people fucking stumbling around like it's South Park. And it just, like, it doesn't sit right with me, and, like, I don't think it's pretty, that kind of a thing. Like, I don't think it's a big deal. And it didn't detract that much.
I actually, if anything, kind of feel the opposite way, where I think the backgrounds look kind of like low poly and ugly, and I think the character illustrations are really great. But I think we talked about similar things before. Like, I think both you and JJ disliked the pop-up book look of like Danganronpa, and like I was into that as well. Like, I don't know, I like the storybook kind of aesthetic of having like the 2D people in the 3D world.
The game would have had to have been extremely different to do 2D people with a 2D background, which I think is the way that it would look the best, in my opinion.
I mean, I won't argue with that.
Yeah. So I can see, like, this feels like a middle ground and a best of both worlds kind of situation, except I just don't like one of those
For
worlds.
you, it's worst of both worlds.
Yeah, it's kind of. But they did a good job with some of it. Like, I feel like I have really strong visual memory of all of the locations. Like, I know you could show me like a screen with no other context of just one of the places, and I would be able to tell you where it was and generally where it fell in the story. And I think that that's good. There are a lot of games out there where a lot of shit just looks the same, or a lot of it blends together, and they did a really good job of making the environments look unique And so I liked that part of it. But yeah, that's it. Move faster is our one mechanical note.
Yeah.
It would have been much better if you could move quicker.
Or if there was like hey, you're in kind of a flat area that you've been in before. Press to accelerate. Yeah. Hell yeah.
6 picks you up. And
Well, 6 also moves
6
so
moves very slow, yeah.
It's so funny to me because, like, you have, like, a lot of the like, a ton of the game's gating is, like, 6 can't go here because there are stairs.
Wheels,
yeah. And it's very, like, I want to say that it is a metaphor for why everything should be wheelchair accessible. It's 2020, get your shit together.
Preach.
World. Yeah, but it isn't. It's just 6 is on. They put the robots on weird treads, which makes him very capable of moving in some locations and very incapable of going anywhere that is man-made. And they use it a lot. And honestly, I make jokes, but it is, like, I think kind of a clever way of separating the two of you.
Yeah, it feels organic.
Well, and there were moments that felt kind of like traditional puzzle gamey, like in the abandoned mining village, where he's like, "Mistress, I cannot get to you." I'm like, "Hold on, 6," and you have to like figure out how to move and manipulate the bridges to get him to a certain point, and then get him so he can help you get to the higher level. And so there is like a partnership kind of dynamic there that I was like, "Oh, this is like video gamey." Like in this video game that I was like just kind of expecting to be matching glyphs and translating shit. I'm like, "Oh, here's a little puzzle. Like, hey, this is fun."
Yeah. That counts as mechanics too. Like, I think they have a couple of like traversal style puzzles. And like when you said the planet with the god statues on it, you have to like lean the bookshelf up against the wall so that 6 can get up. That totally counts. I was really resisting in my mind the interpretation that I hated 6. But you mentioned that mining puzzle, and I remember when you
Were
get
you
to the
frustrated
end of it,
with him?
I was not frustrated with 6. It's at the end of the puzzle, you get up to that top area. It's where this is like the big like pivotal moment of the game where you meet the buried god, and he's like, don't do fucking anything up there, because you are liable to just die horribly. And like I'm looking at the like area and I was like, that's a ladder into a big hole in the ground. Fuck you, 6, I'm going in. I was excited to disobey him in that moment. So I don't know if that was like just a deep-seated hatred that I have for the robot, or if I just am excited about caves. Both are true.
No, I think the game wants you to chafe against 6 because Aaliyah is very much like, fuck the university, fuck my Ari, I'm out here exposing truths, and they don't want to hear about it. And 6 is like the nanny who literally was hired by her surrogate mother to watch out for her, and he has an ethical core that makes him insistent on her behaving rationally. And she's like doing a sick kickflip off of a temple wall and being like, "Eat shit, 6. I go where I want." So like, I think that you are led to believe that she is impulsive enough to make those decisions, and you as a player kind of are with her in that, because you're like, hell yeah, the university doesn't want to know the truth. The truth is out there. I want to believe. And then you do a sick backflip into a hole, meet a god, and almost die. So, I mean,
Yep.
it can be both. It can be that 6 was correct, and also he's a bit chafing in his desire to keep you safe.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's a way they try to like align you and the player, or the player and the character. Where like she starts out at least very like not wanting to do anything that 6 says, and like walking ahead of him, and him being like, slow down, and her being like, no. You can wait in the ship if you have. Well, you can wait in the frickin' car if you have to. Um, but yeah, and then and you get in situations like that, you're like, I want to explore this mining village, and 6 keeps on like pulling my leash, and it makes you want to like, what puts you in her shoes and makes you want to like go down that well.
Yeah,
go
find
down
the
that
most
ladder.
dangerous hole and clamber
the
down
mine
it.
shaft, whatever.
Well,
it
because
is.
technically, you could just say, well, okay, 6, and leave. Like, at any point, you don't have to meet the buried god, even though it's this super cool opportunity to literally talk to some kind of an entity that has the power to VoIP you from one moon to another and can intelligently respond to what you say to it, though still in writing. Which...
Yeah, that's the fucking wildest. Like, I understand that they wanted to make it a point to... Because, one, it's where you get the Heaven's Vault text, which is important for the game. And so, in order to deliver that in a dramatically appropriate way, they have it given to you by the seventh god, the buried god, that is, like, sort of talked about by some people, but like isn't generally accepted as a real thing. And the way that it ties to you is like basically gashapon ball like drop out of its mouth and are like, here, read this. Like it's like a sphere or something that has the text printed, and it doesn't speak like everything else does. And I'm sure that there's like an in-universe reason for it, but I like it, and it's a really satisfying, like, exchange when you're actually doing it. But it is, like, in retrospect, is a little strange that it would have, like, such a specific written way of communicating.
I mean, do we even know that this was a language that was spoken?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Well, so this is the part that I was the most hype about.
Mm-hmm.
It's because there's a bit where you're in the office with Mayari, and she's like, oh yeah, Renba uncovered some words that will, like, work for them, and they start speaking in this really weird language. And they start...
Oh,
Six starts speaking.
The robots do.
And Aaliyah's like, that's Elberithian patois, which is another word for, like, a dialect that's very specific to a particular region, like a non-standard way of speaking. And so I was like, fuck yes, because that's the kind of linguistics that I worked on. Quick plug. The West Virginia Dialect Project, Laboratory at WVU, looks specifically at spoken language and features of Appalachian English, specifically spoken in West Virginia. So what we would do is take recorded audio of interviews of people from more urban or more rural areas of the state who were from all different generations, education levels, and we would look specifically to see what kinds of language variations were happening when they speak. So, I mean, there weren't those kind of written components, like the whole linguistic basis of this game. So when we learned that Elberithians are speaking, this very denigrated population are actually speaking a form of ancient that has been sort of held over and maintained in this sort of isolated, quote-unquote, backwoods society. I was like, this is so cool, because that's what happens with languages. So, like, specifically, like, a patois example would be, like, Creole English, where the speakers aren't speaking French, and they're not speaking Spanish, but they've adopted French and Spanish words into their dialect. So when they speak with each other, it totally makes sense, but we could go down there and be like, what the fuck are they saying? Like, it's not really English, like, we get some of it, but it's not something... There's another, there's an island off the coast of North Carolina called Ocracoke, and it's only accessible by boat. I don't think there's, like, any airport or bridges to the mainland, and it's one of the only places in the world that has any kind of remnants of regularly spoken Elizabethan English, and it's mixed in with, like, some Native American, I don't remember the specific tribe there, an old, like, pirate language. And so this, like, very select group of people are speaking this language that other places in the world don't really speak anymore. So I was hype as fuck. I'm like, Aaliyah has figured it out. She's cracked the code. We're gonna get some, like, spoken language in here. And then it only sort of happened. I was like, God fucking damn it. But of course, because I don't know if you guys took this path, because I had already discovered the moon with the water Cabenia machine on it that you eventually make the river that takes you to Heaven's Vault. I had already done it, but once I learned that Elberthian patois is a form of ancient, I'm like, I gotta go talk to the gate. And so, like, every 5 minutes I'd be like, hey gate, have I learned a word yet that I can talk to you with? And he's like, nah, dude. And then I'd come back and, like, just keep, and I talked to Huang, and I talked to Mayari, and I talked to Six, until I figured out, like, the passcode word that I'm like, this is gonna take me straight to Heaven's Vault. And then it took me back to the fucking River Moon.
Of course.
I was like, son of a bitch. I wanted this to be the answer. I wanted this to be the thing. But anyway, that was just something that I thought was really cool. Obviously, the form of linguistics that they were centering their story around was all about the written and the glyphs and the sort of physical translation of things. But at least there was that kind of avenue of spoken linguistic study.
Yeah. Before we get too far past it, do you know the name of that dialect from
the island?
That island? Yeah, because I'd love to hear that accent.
Oh, if you just Google Ocracoke Island,
Ocracoke.
Ocracoke.
Okay.
Also, fun fact: if you Google Ocracoke and see Walt Wolfram, because he's from NC State, he is my academic grandpappy. So one of his mentees was my mentor. So I met him once or twice. He's really cool. But it's the same kind of idea of studying dialects that are either stigmatized or overlooked. So, and that's something that I think is really cool, is that this whole time in the story you hear about how Elbereth is this, like, shithole backwoods, like, nobodies who are forgotten and overlooked by the Empire, but you learn that that's actually where the seat of power used to be. They're still speaking a form of ancient that supposedly was eradicated from being written and spoken. Like, it's this cool homage to the way that languages actually do evolve, and when invading sort of groups come in and take over, they think that they can wipe out and replace the language entirely, but it never happens because these kind of pockets still hang on. And that's why English is such a weird language, because the Britons moved around and migrated so much and picked up things and then transplanted it, and then there's, like, Roman in there, and then for American English there's Native American words, and, you know, it's this whole thing of, you know, the way that languages are kind of adapted and changed and don't change, that I thought was really cool, that they actually did pick up on. It's not just, oh, there's this dead language that's completely dead, and she's just trying to kind of figure things out, but that actually languages don't, or very rarely, like, completely die, but there are bits and pieces if you know where to look.
Yeah. I feel like it's one of those things that would be not impossible. It would be very difficult to sort of, like, bridge the gap between the two and make it part of the game.
Yeah.
I appreciate the door a whole lot because it introduces it so early, and you get an idea as to, like, what it is, and then just over the cat kiss gate is what it is, is the phrase it uses, and use, like, the fact that that's sort of, like, the key to the spoken language part of it. I think they did their best to put it in as much as they could.
Oh yeah, no.
But just didn't have a lot of opportunity.
That's just my own personal, like, longing.
Yeah. I feel like you should have totally been rewarded for interacting in the gate like that.
Yeah. I mean, but again, that's something that is very specific that I'm bringing to the table that I probably only a very few people would even think to want to bitch about, but, you know. Here we are, ladies. Time to bitch.
You took my one example of a patois in Creole English that I would have been able to say.
Well, that's because I was like, well, what's my example? What's my good example? And I'm like, oh, Creole. People know about Creole. That's a thing.
Yeah, people are familiar with that, at least.
Yeah. I mean, and the only other thing that I could, if I wanted to be picky and, like, be like, is that you would very rarely see someone who is an archaeologist / sociologist / linguist who's out there in the field and translating and whatever. And also that there's very little of the scientific method in what she's doing. She's like, there's a crown, and there's a word on the crown that almost looks like holy. Well, the emperor must have been exiled to this moon, and this was his crown. Like, it's fine because it works for the game. It moves the plot forward. It allows those things to function. But just, again, hearkening back to what I said at the beginning of whoever it was from Inkle that said, like, oh, we made a game that linguists are gonna hate. It's like, no, I didn't. I mean, obviously there are things that she's not, like, a quote-unquote real linguist. She's not a real academic. But it's a game, so I had no problem with any of that, of course.
Yeah. I think we just live in that cinema sins kind of culture where they're like, oh, a real linguist will play this and be like, this isn't anything what linguists is like, or linguistics is like.
Yeah. I definitely read it as more of a linguists hate him.
Yeah.
This simple game.
This one weird robot.
Yeah.
Linguists hate him.
What's Aaliyah's secret? Maybe she's born with it.
I think now is when we need to actually have a YouTube thumbnail that just has like 6 on it and a fucking big arrow pointing to it.
Circles.
Scientists hate him. He's 2,500 years old. What's his secret?
So this actually goes back like a million billion years in the podcast. The timeline is flying backward. Now.
Open up that map.
Chad just threw his controller across the room. He doesn't want to be on this river anymore. Why won't 6 take over?
Oh, okay. Actually, speaking of throwing my controller across the room, I didn't get that mad, but I do want to call out because we skipped over it before, and this is unforgivable. If you make a video game and you have a menu in the video game, let me use the fucking D-pad. The way that the timeline works, when you're in the translation section, if you use the D-pad, it will jump from the end of time to the beginning of time, and you have to use the analog stick to select things. And I did it the whole game. Like, I never got used to it. I just kept jumping like an idiot.
I did the same thing. Like, force of habit, I always tried to use the D-pad in the menu, and then was like, oh, gotta watch that animation of the timeline. But
back,
I blamed that more on myself than I did on the game, personally.
It's a systemic problem.
I think it doesn't even like have prompts on the screen, like D-pad does this.
Oh yeah, it has but that's
I think that makes it okay.
When you
personally.
hit pause in any other game, do you look for a prompt to tell you which control stick to use?
They had a reason for why they designed it that way.
It could have been mapped to shoulder buttons.
I think that scrolled through different tabs on the map.
But not the L2 and R2 buttons. That zoomed on the map. You just have to split it into 2 different interfaces. Let me use the D-pad. That's how video games work. I want to talk about the plot of the game, and now I'm all riled up.
Deep breathing. Deep breathing.
The thing
your emotional levels seem elevated, mistress. Is something wrong?
Yeah, I accidentally pressed the D-pad again.
You turned off your targeting computer?
I'm noodling, all right?
Yeah.
But no, the thing that I wanted to mention was the plot of this game. I looked it up because I was going to mention it on the first half and then never did. The how long to beat for this game is about 20 hours. And I had gotten the like master linguist and learned all the words achievements at like 12 hours, something like that, like a little over halfway through, and I became very concerned that the game was not going to continue to focus on language as it went through, which worried me mostly just because like that's where I was having a lot of the fun, and all of the running around being like we found this his boat crashed and he died because he was using fuel, and then I'll go report that to Maori, and then she's gonna tell you to go do this thing, and then you go there, you're like, oh, found this, let's go report this to some other person on a different planet. Wasn't enrapturing. I wasn't a huge, like, I was not ensorcelled by this, but the language was really keeping me going. It's like at that moment when I would have finished it, like when you get to the library and you're in like the final stretch, when the plot shifts from the story of like, I mean, you can still definitely focus on that stuff if it was really, rustling but I really pivoted toward the telescopes and the ancient observatory and the heavens vault parts of the plot, and that carried me to the end, and I found that stuff really fascinating and interesting. So I want to know, how much importance did you guys put on the ancient stuff versus the modern day, like, character driven plot stuff?
I guess for me, like, I like all parts of this game kind of like in equal amounts. Personally, I'm like that with like most games. I don't know if that's unusual. I feel like it is unusual on this podcast. I feel like you and JJ tend to like focus in on things, but I like things usually more generally. And I know a version of this game that was just the linguistics part would be really interesting and cool, but I wouldn't like nearly as much. Like, I like that there's an adventure game in here too that balances it out, and I do think that the ancient mystery of the galaxy or the nebula, whatever they call it, is the more interesting part. Like, I liked it all, but like that's where the story got particularly juicy. Like, it worked out in the way that I think you're describing, whereas like main chunk of the game, like piecing together the language is the driving force, and then once you've gotten the book and you're able to like kind of finish that up, it gets into like the more interesting part of the story to carry you to the end.
Okay, I want to know what was in the book, because like I said, I ran out of oxygen right before I got the book.
Oh, you just couldn't get it?
Yeah.
The way that the scene plays out is you go up to the book and it is chained to the pedestal that it's on, and you can't remove the chain. Like, you can try a bunch of different stuff, but you can't remove it. And then the thing that you're standing on, like the second floor, collapses. And when the floor collapses, you kind of like struggle to get up, and well, I guess what happened in mine, you like go up and then it falls and then you jump down and then you run out of oxygen. Like, it's like scripted that you will run out of oxygen. And when you get back, Six is like, oh, the chain broke and I brought the book back with you. And it's like this moment where you're like, oh, Six, you're being useful for once.
Just like always.
My beautiful, beautiful son, how you've never failed me, and I love you so. Said I.
And the book, from what I was able to translate of it,
So the whole thing.
the whole book is, I mean, not all of it was like 100% set in stone, but the book was mostly, it was a description of, I have two interesting things about this, and one of them really relates to something that podcast viewers will not get. But the book is essentially the description of the loop. It says, like, in this book, we're going to talk, the things that happened in the past will happen again, the something, and then, like, there'll be all this, and then they start talking about the gods, and there's several paragraphs about the gods, and, like, what each of them do. I don't know if it goes into each of them. I remember specifically the sky god and the serpent god get pretty strong shout outs, and it guides you to where Heaven's Vault is. But the beginning of the book also starts with, I think the literal very first line that you translate is like, everything in this book is true. And I was like, oh, I hate that you feel like you have to say that, because I found an ancient book in an old, like in this old library that was literally chained to a pedestal that was on a map of the nebula that was stratified over 3 floors. Like, I'm gonna assume it's true. Why you gotta tell me this?
Well,
And it goes on, and I think it's just literally to teach you words,
Yeah.
so that the rest of it can come together and make more sense.
It's a way for you to like fill out the language. It is long.
Yeah.
Like Chad was literally sitting there for like 2 hours translating the whole thing.
well, that's how I
And
felt.
I did for maybe like 40 minutes.
Well, that's how I felt at a couple of the inscriptions at the Heaven's Vault site. It was like,
God.
here's a ruin. And I was like, oh, sweet. Probably an inscription in here. And it was like, and I was almost like, son of a, like, I almost rage quit. And I'm, you know me,
Yeah.
hardcore gamer.
That was the
who
that one
loves
on
to
the
rage
ruin.
quit. Oh, yeah. Like, it just didn't stop. It just kept going. I'm like, there's no way. And I didn't finish it. Like, I put my
Neither
best,
did I.
I put my best guesses in there and was like, well, okay. But,
that was the final boss of the game. was that ruin
Yeah.
inscription that was like 3 miles long for no reason.
Yeah, that's one like kind of clunky, frustrating thing that we haven't mentioned yet. Is that when you're filling in like long phrases, it takes like you have to like put in all the pieces, and you have to like notice every little thing and put in every little like comma or every little squiggly line, even though you don't think that those go there.
Right.
It makes you put it all in, and then it's just like, nope, this was wrong, and it only crosses off one word.
Yep.
So then you have to do it all again, and then it's like, nope, this was wrong, and it crosses out one more word, and then you do it all again.
Yeah, that's the thing that I want to know, what the mechanical cutoff point was there, because I feel like there are times when you get an inscription and you look at it and she goes, I'm not going to be able to figure this out, and it just banks it. It's like, this is for later.
Yeah, I feel like that only happened to me like 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, and there were a bunch of times when I literally felt like it would be like 2 words. It would be like 3 symbols, and I would put in the symbols, and it would be like, nope, that's not right. They crossed this one out, and I went and filled in everything else with the stupid little things. It's like, nope, that one's not right. And I was like, there isn't a combination of these things. Like, why are you fucking with me right now?
Yeah, it's gotta have something to do with like the percentage of words you know, and like as we were talking about like building up like word families, like you don't have enough words with this symbol in it to be able to do this.
Right.
And,
Yeah, I don't know.
but yeah, it did seem kind of like spotty.
it's just trying to teach you the tedium of academic research and development. No. Yeah, I mean, you must have hit the master linguist achievement before I did, because I felt like, for me, it was much more of like a sandwiching of the language. Like, first, obviously, you encounter, at least I did, Cabenya first, the water goddess.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, there was that. And I knew that there were, like, either 6 or 7 gods. And then, like, you encounter the serpent god. So I'm like, okay, I'm learning more about kind of this whole thing. And then, you know, like, so I feel like I was kind of maybe doing it more as I went, which maybe would have been, I don't know. It seems like you didn't have a problem with it. But it seemed like
it's the book's fault.
Yeah.
Like, me getting the book, like, and you not getting the book would have just changed right at that moment. Like, it was a huge precipitous drop off
Yeah.
in the amount of opportunities that you would have had to learn language, opposed to my playthrough when I did have the book. So that's really what, like, I'm sure that we played it at least similarly.
Yeah.
From what I've heard, you've definitely put in a lot more reps as far as like getting everything that you could in the places that you could. And I got the liposuction
Yeah.
version of weight loss for the language, which was just finding that book and getting 1 million words for free. And by for free, I mean in 2 hours.
Yeah.
But what I was
For
going
the
to say...
low price of 2 hours of your life.
But about the everything in this book is true type thing, if you get NK, the Empress, at one point you ask her about the loop, and you're like, hey, what's up with the loop? And she's like, oh, that's bullshit. The robots made it up
Ooh.
to appease the humans, because the humans had such an issue with the thought of dying that the robots were like, no, it's okay. Not only will you be reincarnated, everything will repeat itself exactly. As a way of, like, placating them. So the fact that it is in the book, like, everything that we are about to tell you is fucking real, to me is, like, just a way of being, like, you know, it's an atheistic kind of interpretation of any religious text. If you've just been told Jesus Christ is a lie, and then it's like everything in the Bible, which I'm about to tell you about, is so true. It's just a way of you being like, okay, so this is another part of the culture that I have come to learn is... And it's the same thing with the Heaven's Vault story. You said something about the first time that you see Heaven's Vault being with the buried god. I can't remember. I feel like maybe there was something I found earlier. Somehow. I could be wrong. But it was either right around that. Somehow I asked Huang and then I asked Mayari for the story. But it's the same thing because we come to learn that Heaven's Vault is real. But it was turned into something completely different. Like, the bones of the story are true, but through the ages, it was transformed into, like, this allegorical sort of children's story. So that...
Which is... Yeah, no, that is accurate. I just wanted to praise that the game does that. Like, it actually does take the story and make the version that modern people know, like the Heaven's Vault that people are aware of in this society, is transformative. Like, it's a totally different... It has, like, a moral to it. Like, it's... They say it's a children's story and stuff like that. It really is like that, whereas in any other video game that you play, the story would just be word for word accurate to exactly what happened. And
the ancient legends say.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, okay, so I need the 3 golden objects to do the thing.
3 golden artifacts to open Heaven's Vault.
So the fact that Heaven's Vault is, like, apocryphal is a huge fucking deal as far as, like, the believability of the way language and narrative works in this game.
Exactly. But to me, that's the same thing with the loop, where the loop has turned into this... Of course the loop is real. Of course, it's what our grandmothers believed in and our grandmothers' grandmothers and so on and all the way back. But eventually there was a source of that, whether it was fact or as at least what the former Empress will have you hear. Like, nah, that's all bullshit. And I'm like, well, you were there, so probably gonna believe you over this dusty tome that insists on telling me everything I'm about to tell you is 100% true.
Yeah, and it gives the game, like, an interesting kind of tone, too, because I feel like on the Market Moon, the one that's up, like, the top left of the map...
Renaki.
Yeah. A
It's
lot of the people are, like, real...
It's Pronoun City over here. I got you. Special names, no problem.
Yeah, I thought about, like, finding a list to write them all down, but it's hard to look up stuff about this game.
Oh, yeah.
So I did not do that. But I feel like a lot of the people there... are really adamant about the loop. Like, I feel like they bring it up there a lot, and especially, like, I think it's like the robot junk dealer's daughter is very, like, religious. So, like, it gives that, like, an interesting tone of, like, how, like, they almost kind of don't believe it, but they're, like, kind of, like, comforting themselves by, like, knuckling down on it.
Well, it's become a cultural institution at this point. It's just...
Yeah, like, they think that, that like, sailing, like, is, like, a sin or something, like, leaving the planet.
It corrupts your soul.
Yeah.
Because...
You guys had a lot more dialogue on this planet than I did, I can tell you that much.
Basically...
I didn't know that he had
Chad
a
runs
daughter.
past enemies. Chad runs past NPCs.
I bought a gecko, though.
Oh, okay, you got an achievement that I didn't. Grats.
Oh, hey.
Grazie.
I also didn't buy the gecko.
But basically the thought is that when they're waiting to be reincarnated, dead souls go out into the rivers So if you sail, your soul will be corrupted by all of the dead souls that are out on the rivers, and you will have an impure soul. And so if you stay put, your soul will be pure, is, I guess, the point. But yeah, I mean, I think the game deals with time in an interesting way, the way that things are stretched and manipulated and change over time. And I mean, it kind of leads us into the big final question for me, which was, what was your final decision? Which is, you know,
vault or not to vault?
Did you vault? Which is, I chose not to vault. And Aaliyah gives this whole speech at the end about how, like, decay is inevitable. Like, everything has to die eventually. Like, there is a natural end, and things will progress. And, like, as her job as an archaeologist, she's seen that kind of thing firsthand. And so, to me, like, that made the most sense. And also because, why the fuck would I want to get my ass launched to who knows where with me and a robot who is not even my precious son anymore? She's just some empress. But it sounds like, based on what you said earlier, Chad, about Six being the only robot in the galaxy, that you chose to vault.
Yeah, I had the nebula meet a very unnatural end as I dried up all the rivers and flew away into the stratosphere. No, yeah, I chose to vault. I talked to Andy about him and his decision at the end, and sort of like what led him to make that choice. And we actually either chose different dialogue or had different things happen in our playthrough that each led us to our own conclusion about what would be the best option. Mm-hmm. And when I talked to Six, because he had transformed into the eagle that was going to tell me how to vault. Mm-hmm. He was like, I asked, I think the order of the questions was, I was like, what happens if we vault? And it's like, we'll suck up all the rivers and like everyone here will just die soon. Like, you're basically taking all the resources from this nebula, packing them into a ship, and going to start over somewhere else. Because in order to vault, it had to have like identified another viable location in space. So like, I was assured that what would happen is that they would die, and then we would make new people somewhere else. And I was like, what happens if we don't vault? And he's like, the rivers will eventually run out and everyone will die just the same. And I was like, well, let's just get this party started then. Like, he was like, we would be the last two people alive. I was like, okay, so I'm alive? Because before, if I didn't vault, I would be dead. Because I'm stuck on this planet with no recourse, and I'm dying of shitty lung disease. So I took the arguably selfish option to kill the galaxy and leave.
I might be misremembering it, but like, I don't think I was told that if I didn't vault that I would die. Right. Because you just leave.
Yeah,
if
you had another way to get off the planet, didn't you?
I can't remember exactly, but you do leave, and it's like all the rivers are restored. Oh, by the way, I did not vault, if that wasn't clear. But
well, unless
you do, it's implied that you just leave the planet.
Well, but unless you had something unlocked that I missed, when you go to Heaven's Vault, there are no return rivers. You create a river to Heaven's Vault outside of where any of the rivers can reach. And so you land on the planet and you're done. I mean, if you choose not to vault, it releases the rivers, giving you a path back. But, I mean, there's no guarantee that was going to happen. When you land on the planet, your assumption is you are going to die there. So, it is kind of the most selfless option. Unless, I mean, you know that it has taken up, like, 60% of the nebula's rivers, and like that's why the rivers are disappearing. So you can kind of infer that if you shut the vault down, it will re-release the rivers, but there's still no guarantee that that will take you back.
I sure didn't infer that.
Oh, really? Because you know that it's been saying, like, the darkness is coming, the darkness is spreading, and when you talk to people, you learn that, like, yeah, rivers have been drying up, and we don't really know why. And the eagle being in the vault says, like, we are at 60% capacity. If we continue to, like, we have to continue to absorb the rivers in order to vault, but then releasing the rivers will be irreversible. Like, they will not be able to, if they release them, regain what power they had. So basically, you get one chance. Do not miss your chance to vault. This opportunity comes once in a lifetime. You better vault yourself.
Once in a loop.
Yeah. I knew about that stuff. I think my assumption was that it would not repopulate the rivers if I stopped it now. I thought it would just stop, like, where it's at. I don't know if they ever used the word, like, release with me. I don't know. But either way, I chose to relink the flame Dark Souls and send us into a new...
God damn it, you could not control yourself for one fucking episode. You knew I was gonna be here.
Have this Soulsian...
You knew I was going to be here, and you had to drop the Dark Souls reference. You had to do it.
We made a joke. We made a joke when we were talking about the endings. That because the whole idea, like the cyclical timeline and making a decision at the end whether to perpetuate it or to end it is a thing in Dark Souls as well. And
no, I know.
That it's like Dark Souls. And Chad could not. You're right. He could not contain himself from making it on the podcast.
No, it wouldn't have not happened. Game least likely to be compared to Dark Souls, not Heaven's Vault. But yeah, I don't know. It doesn't. As far as I'm aware, none of the possible endings really give you much of an epilogue. They want you to play New Game Plus, and this is a 20-hour game. And we were doing it for the podcast, so I did not play New Game Plus in order to get more context for it. But I did do a little bit of reading, and I think in the end I like my decision as far as the implications for the story goes. Well,
because presumably New Game Plus, would you just loop back and do everything all over again?
Yeah. I believe they want it to read like New Game Plus is a new loop where because you retain your knowledge of Ancient as like the carryover. So as you go through, and I guess they've put in, there's like differing dialogue. People will like talk about like, oh, you've been here before, whereas you did it in your first playthrough, but you weren't there in this one, so you know about stuff. So it's treated a little bit differently. It's like your character has a different backstory in New Game Plus as opposed to in regular game.
Regular game vanilla.
Yeah.
Regular game minus.
Yes, regular game. New game minus.
Vanilla game huge.
Vanilla bean game latte.
Extra whip. What?
Well,
no,
yeah,
I mean,
so I don't know. I think it's cool.
I mean, I actually could see myself picking this game back up just because I want a full ancient dictionary. Damn it. Like, there are words I know are out there that I did not finish because obviously maybe I will just continue to loop this game until I can fully and confidently translate that goddamn elegy on the wall of the ruin at Heaven's Vault.
It's such a small brick building that has a 7-mile long transcription on it. It makes no sense.
It's probably just like the ramblings of a madman too. Like it doesn't actually say anything meaningful.
Or it's like a teenager, like
it's like propaganda.
Like the emo equivalent of writing like song lyrics to My Chemical Romance on your bedroom wall as an angsty teenager. To like some like real hardcore thoughts about the Sky God.
What if it just really is My Chemical Romance lyrics? It's like the first verse of Dead is just inscribed on this wall.
Welcome to the Black Parade. When I was a young boy.
A young boy.
The Sky God took me into the vault to see a bunch of robots. I don't know.
Do we have anything? Do we have anything that we want to hit before we press further?
I just want to say, an embarrassing amount of times did I accidentally refer to this game as Heaven's Gate, which is a cult that killed themselves because they thought that they would ascend to an alien spaceship that would take them to another layer of existence. And I'd be like, yes,
is that the Halley's Comet thing?
That's what I was going to ask.
I think so.
It is.
Yeah, I think they had a thing with Halley's Comet, yeah. And I'd be like, oh yeah, Daniel, I'm going to play Heaven's Gate. And Daniel's like, no, you're not. I'm like, oh no.
Don't drink the Kool-Aid.
You're right. That's not the name of this one.
Did you or did you not drink the Kool-Aid at the end?
Yeah. Did you or did you not ascend to the next heavenly layer?
I'm going to make a boot up Jonestown.
On that note.
The cult genre. Yes, on that note. Do we have final thoughts?
Well, I mean,
I'm breaking the cycle.
Yeah. If anyone from Inkle was listening, there's one ex-linguist assistant. I hesitate to call myself a linguist for real, but you know, a semi-retired linguist. Thought the game was delightful and refreshing, and we're kind of a soft science. We're not like a chemistry or a biology. You know, whenever you deal with people and culture and those kind of sociological things, it tends to get a little squishy. And we're kind of a misunderstood discipline. So honestly, I think most linguists would be hype as hell that, you know, an artistic sort of genre like a video game company would want to sort of take on this idea and play with it in that space. And yeah, I thought it was a really cool game. It's been on my radar for a long time, and I thought it was incredibly relaxing, even the bits where I was noodling around in the river, especially the bits when I was noodling around in the river. Yeah, so I do recommend, and I am excited to see if it actually does end up on the Switch at some point in 20. Because I think Switch would be an actually really fun way to play this game.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Touchscreen would be nice to have to like move the words into little slots.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I like this game a lot. I saw it on that list years ago, and I thought it looked really cool, but I was like skeptical, or not that's not the right word, but I was like wondering whether or not it would lean more like educational almost, or like be like really focused on the like translating the ancient language part, and like less so on like the video gamey adventure stuff. And it struck a really nice balance for me, which I lived up to like my expectations of like what I wanted out of it. Like it was a nice blend. And so yeah, I was really happy with it. I give it a lot of props. Like there's no like combat in it, and that's really rare that you get games that have like a conflict that doesn't involve combat of some kind, and it's really hard to design for that stuff because it's such untread ground. So I give this game a lot of props. They actually managed to make like a really engaging word translation system that's really fun to work through, and they had crafted a cool world to put it in. It is a bit rough around the edges. Steering the boat, as we said, could be clunky, and even there are some parts with like the camera and like moving around the world that would be a bit clunky at times. But overall, like, that's not enough to really bring it down for me. I liked this a lot and really enjoyed my time with it. Genuinely unique game. Like, we haven't talked about anything like this, and as the podcast goes on, I value that more and more. So,
Wait, Andy.
big thumbs up for me.
Andy, you didn't unlock the secret combat ending where you fight Professor Mayari with katanas in the Iox courtyard?
You pick 6 up and you throw them over the edge.
I don't know if everybody else did this, but you can fight the kid with the fire poker.
Oh yeah, you do hit him with a stick.
What?
Or whatever.
No!
Kid comes at you with a sword, and one of the options is to draw the fire poker. And I was like, yeah, on guard.
I did the same thing.
He never came
you
at me.
scare him.
He didn't come at
Oh,
me.
wow.
No.
You were better at dealing with children than us.
That tracks. I too liked this game. So yeah, I didn't know anything about this game when it was suggested. I was not looped in on the discussion of this game when it originally came up.
Looped.
And
Looped.
I was not the looped in. And I enjoyed the majority of it. I think I played this in fairly long individual sessions. It kind of fell over that like wintry doldrums, like where I was kind of just, I'll just spend 7 hours not moving and doing this. And
That quarantine life.
yeah. And I felt like my thoughts while I was playing the game scattered all over the place, but always looped back around, looped again, to the language and how sort of me trying to piece together how they managed to fit this into the game in a way that made sense. And that's kind of where I want to let my final thoughts fall, is I'm really impressed, genuinely very, like, academically impressed with how well they managed to make this work. Like, just an example, one of the things that stupidly floated into my mind was, like, I remember translating the word snake and being like, the fact that they have a translation for the word snake means that in this science fiction boat space universe, snakes exist, like just regular ass snakes that they slither around, they go like, is a real thing here. And that, like, I started seeing like patterns, and it's like, oh, all of these other things that are like the parts that they had to draw from the real world to make this world unique but still close enough that the language made sense and wasn't impossible to translate because it was completely foreign, like a Star Wars language or something. Like, just kept, my mind was blown over and over again, IGN.com. And I don't know, that is enough for me to recommend this game to, like, anyone who's interested in just unique, unusual stuff. Also, it's from the same developer who made 80 Days, which was a really interesting phone game. And if you did play this game and liked it, I could recommend 80 Days. I think this game is more playable to me. But if you're not like me and have patience and are smart, then you can play 80 Days and it'll probably be really good. Thank you for listening to No Clip this week.
What are we talking about next time?
Hey.
Oh, I was going to ask
you
what
know.
you're talking about next time. But, you know, we reach the same point. So, you know, don't worry about it. Tell me what we're
Next
talking
time,
about next time.
Next time, we're going to be talking about No More Heroes. Because we're sick of heroes.
Yeah, it's an action, like a third-person action hack and slash kind of style game, in the vein of something like a Devil May Cry or God of War, kind of. But it was on the Wii, and it made use of, like, you know, waggling the Wii remote around. But we're going to be playing the Switch version, which you can use a regular controller for. And, yeah, it's like a very tongue-in-cheek action hack and slash game from like 2010 or something.
Yeah, we thought, what would be the most opposite game from Heaven's Vault, and this is what we landed on. So hopefully you'll join us for that. Until that time, you can get a hold of us. All of our contact information is on our website at noclippodcast.com or splattershot.pro, where you can find links to our YouTube, to our Twitter, to the Discord. You can listen to all of our old episodes. Like, word games? Did we do any of these?
You can listen to
most similar thing.
You can listen to episodes that I was on, like the recent
Like
Jackbox.
episode 100.
Jackbox.
Animal Crossing.
You can listen to the
Life
episode.
is Strange too.
Yeah, you can listen to the episode that I wasn't on, but should have been on. Return of the Obra Dinn. An excellent game. I had so many good thoughts about that game. The world will never know because no one asked me. Oh, and if you're interested in learning some more about the kind of linguistics works that I used to do, you can check out the West Virginia Dialect Project. I think it's just wvdialect.com. Headed up by Kirk Hazen. Really cool organization. Doing stuff back in the homeland. W. And if you're interested in looking up anything about the Ocracoke Brogue, you can check out anything that you Google from Ocracoke Brogue, or specifically things that the stuff out of the NC State linguistics lab that they were doing recently. While we're from Kirk Hazen.
I feel like nothing in the history of the world has needed spelled more
than
Ocracoke if you're going to tell people to get
No, can you just
a word that you could type into Google and you could figure it out.
It is Ocracoke. Ocracoke.
Wow.
Exactly how it sounds.
It's literally phonetic.
Yeah.
I would not have expected that.
Oh, I mean, and if you are looking for some other pop culture-y fun linguistics things, there's a linguist called Gretchen McCullough, and she does a lot with internet linguistics. So things like emojis or acronyms and sort of internet speak. It's not all like stuffy prescriptivist grammatical stuff. Like, there's actually some really cool pop culture linguistic stuff out there. So if you played this game and are interested in, poking around out there, I do recommend Gretchen McCullough, and there's a whole wealth of stuff out there about, different kinds of patois, dialectical variations, non-standard English,
Have more
etc.
than one example of a patois the next time that you talk about language. Come more prepared than I did.
Listen, that's why you had me on. Come on.
Exactly.
Come on.
All right, Chad. I've got this strange artifact.
Uh-huh.
And I think it's got these runes on it, and I think they translate to smash that like button.
You can be sure of your translation of smash now. All right,
we did it.
All right, woo! Good job, everyone. Oh.
All right. Save that recording.
All right. Time to do the No Clip podcast. Let's talk about ladies.